What is the New York Giants' number one offseason priority? We'll go through the list and try to figure it out next on the Locked On Giants podcast.
You are Locked On Giants, your daily New York Giants podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
This episode of the Locked On Giants podcast is brought to you by Prize Picks, the easiest and most exciting way to play daily fantasy sports. Go to prizepicks.com/LockedOnNFL and use the promo code LockedOnNFL, all lowercase, for a first deposit match up to $100. Hello, Giant fans, and welcome to another edition of the Locked On Giants podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast family, your team every day. My name is Patricia Traina, P-Train, credential member of the New York Giants media. You can find me on Twitter at Patricia_Traina, or if you want to call it the site formerly known as Twitter, I think it's now known as X. You can find me there. You can also find me on Instagram and Threads at Patty Traina, PATTITRAINA, and a special welcome in to my everydayers, my Blue Crew community members, and of course, my newcomers and everybody in between. Thank you so much for making us your first listen of the day, or if you watch on YouTube, your first watch of the day. On today's Locked On Giants podcast, we're going to start setting some priorities for the Giants in the offseason. Now, I know that there are 3 games remaining to the Giants 2023 season, but with the playoffs pretty much out of reach at this point, with, there really being nothing to play for except the old pride, we're going to start looking ahead. And what I have done is I've made a list of priorities for the team, things that they need to address. And we're going to talk about those. We're going to try and put them in some kind of order. We're going to also talk about, can they get it done? I'm going to take a look at the salary cap as it stands as of today. Now, the salary cap, of course, is still fluid, and it will be, but I'm going to talk about all that on today's episode of Locked On Giants. Again, happy to have you with us. Let's get right into it. Let's talk about the needs of this team. Now, depending on who you ask, if you were to ask anybody at random, what are the top needs in order for the New York Giants, you would probably get answers such as quarterback, offensive line, wide receiver, edge rusher, cornerback depth. Maybe some people might even say running back, because who knows what's going to happen with Saquon Barkley. I want to go through this list of needs real quick and try to establish some priority here. Now, a lot of people say, okay, Giants got to address quarterback. And Joe Schoen, the general manager himself, said that they are going to have to add a quarterback. The reason, of course, being Tyrod Taylor is going to be a free agent next year, and the team just doesn't seem to be interested in having him back. Daniel Jones, of course, is dealing with the ACL injury that he is rehabbing from. So who knows if he's going to be ready. There is a very good possibility that Tommy DeVito, who is currently starting for the Giants, he could end up as QB2 for this team next year, and maybe even start some games if Daniel Jones isn't ready. So, with the Giants draft, would they sign free agency? Well, that's a topic for another show, but quarterback is definitely a need for this team. Regardless of what happens, with Daniel Jones, they have to add a third one. And I think depending on how Daniel's recovery goes, because Daniel's already been named the starter for next year from head coach Brian Daboll. So depending on how soon he's ready, that could dictate whether the Giants go draft and how high in the draft, or do they go free agency, or do they go the undrafted route? So we'll talk about, how they're going to potentially address all this stuff in an upcoming show, but quarterback is still a need regardless. All right. Offensive line, I think we can all agree that that's a need as well. The Giants right now have questions at offensive tackle. Evan Neal cannot seem to get back on the field. He was listed as did not practice on the injury report this week after being limited in practice last week. So that, as far as I'm concerned, is a setback. And the longer he remains out, the less likely he's going to answer some of these questions if he can come back and start to develop. Now, I have a theory when it comes to injured players. I say that if they miss a lot of time, they also miss a lot of development. And I don't care if they were a first round pick, a top 10 pick, a top 5 pick, or a seventh round or an undrafted free agent. If you're missing a lot of time, you don't get the opportunity to benefit necessarily from the on field work, which is probably just as important, if not more important, than the classroom work. So for the Giants to sit there and at the end of the year, if they say, oh, we're comfortable with Evan Neal going in as our right tackle next year, I don't know that I would buy that. I'll be honest with you. I mean, Evan Neal, we saw the struggles with him trying to get comfortable, never really happened. And then, of course, the injuries happen. And he's missed a lot of time. And I think if you're Joe Shane, while you would like to think that Evan Neal is the answer at right tackle, no guarantees there. Also, of course, the Giants will have to probably address the interior of the offensive line. They're set with John Michael Schmitz at center, but their guard play was not very good this year. So you add in the fact that, their younger guards, the Shane Lemieux before he got injured, the Marcus McKethins, the Joshua Azutus before he got injured, that those guys never really developed, that the guys on the practice squad haven't, stepped up to where they're being called up. And what we have right now today in Ben Bredesen and Justin Pugh is the best that apparently the team feels they have. That's a concern. So I think interior offensive line is going to be, just as important for the Giants. Wide receiver. Look, the Giants tried to get by without a number one receiver this year. They tried to make that Darren Waller. He, of course, had the injuries. It didn't work. And it wasn't going to work, to be honest with you. Time to stop messing around. Last year, this time, I was screaming about getting a center and to stop messing around with plugging in guards and, other offensive line at center. Get a legitimate center. That's going to be my battle cry this offseason. Get a legitimate number one receiver. It can really make a difference in this offense, especially if you want to take this offense to the next level, open it up, be more explosive. The Giants just, maybe Jalen Hyatt can bring that. Darius Slayton, is he going to be back next year? I don't know. Paris Campbell, I don't think will be back. They got to get speed at the receiver position. And Darren Waller, for as good of a player he is, he's also damaged goods. And I don't think that they can afford to roll with him next year thinking that he's going to be their pseudo number one receiver. Edge rusher. That was another position last year that I screamed about. I could not understand why they did not add to their group, especially after seeing how Azeez Ojulari had injury issues, which, by the way, he had again this year. So they have Kayvon Thibodeau, they brought back Jihad Ward, who kind of, didn't have the impact he had last year. They really didn't have anybody else. So, we talk about the pass rush and why didn't the Giants get more pressure on Derek Carr? Yeah, scheme was part of it, but do they have the personnel to do it? That's a big part of it as well. And then, of course, I mentioned cornerback depth. I don't think Adoree Jackson is going to be back next year. Deonte Banks should be the number one cornerback next year without question. You ask yourself, okay, what happened with Trey Hawkins, who was lighting things up in the preseason, started out and faded away? What happened with his development? So, you could probably stand to add another veteran cornerback back there to balance out that young group because, after seeing Hawkins not really develop to where he could, he should be playing at this point in the year, that was a concern. There's also a concern, is Cordell Flott, an answer? Darnay Holmes is going to be an unrestricted free agent. So, what's going to go on there? So yeah, the Giants, they need cornerback depth. That's probably just as important as edge rusher on defense. So those are the main areas that I think the Giants need. Now, coming up next, I'm going to talk about the prioritizing of some of these areas, and I'm going to put a little extra spin on this. I'm going to put a different spin on it because we could talk about all the needs we want, but there has to be a few other things to fall into place. And I'm going to talk about that coming out of the break. Hey, Giant fans, if you've got a specific food craving, but don't have that food readily available in the house, or maybe you're wanting a meal from your favorite local eatery, but you don't have the time to run out to get it, well, now you don't have to thanks to DoorDash. DoorDash can bring you what you want, when you want it, morning, noon, and night, including groceries and items from convenience stores and pharmacies. For years, I've trusted DoorDash to deliver freshly made meals from my favorite restaurants, whether I'm at home or on the road. And more recently, I've relied on them to bring me items from my local pharmacy and convenience stores, and they've never let me down. DoorDash brings you what you ordered, or they will make it right. And you can save on all your deliveries with a monthly Dash Pass membership that more than pays for itself after just a couple of deliveries. There's never been a better time than now to join DoorDash, as right now, for a limited time, you can get 50% off your first DoorDash order up to $10 when you spend $15 or more. Download the DoorDash app and enter the promo code LOCKED23 at checkout to get your introductory discount. Offer subject to change. Terms apply. All right, Giant fans, before we get back to the topic at hand, did you know that Locked On has launched the first ever national sports 24/7 streaming channel on YouTube? Locked On Sports Today is here for you all day, every day, covering the top sports stories of the day with the local experts of Locked On, plus our national shows covering every league. Go to Locked On Sports Today on YouTube and subscribe to the first ever national sports 24/7 streaming channel. All right, everybody, welcome back to Locked On Giants. You have me, Patricia Traina, P Train, and appreciate you tuning in as always. I know a lot of people are getting ready for the holidays that are coming up, the Christmas holiday on Monday. And speaking of Monday, no Locked On Giants program on Monday. What we are going to do is on Monday, I'm going to have a special show called Renner's Ranks. Mike Renner is the host. You probably know the name from Pro Football Focus. He used to be with them, and he is now with the Locked On Network. So he's going to do a special show called where he ranks draft prospects and whatnot. So it's called Renner's Ranks. But do not fear, Giant fans, because I will be covering the Giants-Eagles game. I will have takeaways from that afterwards. So you're not getting rid of me totally. It's just you're not going to have a show for Monday morning that's true Locked On Giants. But I hope you would check out Renner's Ranks. Mike does a really good job. And actually, I hope to have him on a future episode of Locked On Giants to talk about free agents and draft picks and all that kind of stuff. So please do check it out. And let's get back to our topic, which is setting the priorities of the New York Giants as they head into the offseason. And in the first segment, I gave you 5 different position groups that I feel the Giants have to address. But in terms of what is the most important, I'm going to take a step back here and give you a different kind of slant on this. I think the first priority of the offseason that the Giants have got to address before they do anything else, and that includes, starting their annual review of the players that they do every year, they've got to address the coaching situation. Now, Brian Daboll is not going anywhere. I know I get that question a lot. Do I think that Daboll will be back? Yes, I do think he will be back. Do I think all 3 coordinators will be back? No. Do I think that there will be changes on the assistant level? Yes. And, look, I've spoken about this before. I've said that I believe Mike Kafka will probably not be on this team next year. I don't know that I can say for sure that Thomas McGahee, the special teams coordinator, will be back next year. I am hoping that Wink Martindale, the defensive coordinator, will be back next year. I'd really hate to see him go, but who knows? With all these head coaching jobs that are expected to open, maybe Wink gets a call and he takes one of the jobs. So there is a slim possibility that all 3 coordinators are not back next year. Now, with that, there is a trickle-down effect, and that is with the position assistants. So if we talk about the offensive side of the ball, Brian Dable is an offensive mind. He will probably take over the play calling next year. I could see that happening. He could take over the play calling, promote Shea Tierney as the offensive coordinator. Shea Tierney, currently the quarterback's coach, and just go from there. And just let those guys, Dable and Tierney, develop any young quarterbacks they do decide to bring in, and let them continue working with Tommy DeVito and with Daniel Jones once Daniel is healthy. Offensive line. I think we can all agree that the Giants need to consider making a change there. I've made this point before on the show, and I will make it again. We can sit here and scream about the offensive line and how the Giants need a tackle, how they need a guard, how they need this, how they need that. Well, they've been bringing in talent. All right. I had a question for the Giants Country Mailbag that I'm doing on Saturday. Somebody asked me, how is it that Joe Shane has missed so badly on 4 picks? Has Joe Shane really missed, or has the coaching just not been there? All right, some of it might be on the players. I'll give you that. But 4 misses, got to look at the coaching, folks. And I believe that before we can start saying, okay, the Giants should draft this guy or they should sign this guy, they've got to straighten out the coaching. Because when you have coaches come in, and I'm going to use the offensive line as an example. All right. Evan Neal, when he came in, yes, he had a body of work at Alabama where he was successful. So he comes into the NFL, and why all of a sudden are you tweaking what you're asking him to do? So in other words, instead of asking Evan Neal to block straight ahead, which is what I believe he did in Alabama, now you're asking him to, block on an angle. Why are you messing with what worked, what got him there? Now you might say, well, they should be able to adapt to the pro level, and maybe that's successful in the pro level, but whatever happened to the theory, if it ain't broke, don't fix it? That's what I see happen. So, you have to make sure that I think the coaching staff is a fit for the talent that you have and that you want to bring in. Because, look, I can remember Joe Shane talking about his job is to give the coaching staff what they need. So now if you're looking at all new coordinators, for example, what might a new defensive coordinator want? And how would that vary from, say, what Wink Martindale wanted? So that, to me, has to be the top priority. And I do think that will be a top priority. From there, then you can sort of slot and figure out what are the priorities from the players' perspectives. All right. So if we're talking about that, to me, on offense, I think you got to get a number 1 receiver. I've mentioned that in the previous segment. I'm going to mention it again. You got to get a number 1 receiver, because right now, if you want to be an explosive offense that stretches the field and you don't have that guy that can do it on a consistent basis, that can create headaches for the opposing team, then what are you doing? You're never going to reach that goal. People say, okay, offensive line, you got to address that. Okay, maybe, a new offensive line coach can get the more out of McKethan and Izudu and these other guys that, maybe they're going to bring back, as well as any younger guys they're going to bring in. So I would not be against them bringing in more offensive line help, but I also would like to see what would happen with a change of coaching staff at that position. People have said quarterback needs to be, addressed, that Daniel Jones is not the answer moving forward, and the Giants have to take one of these top quarterbacks in the draft. I don't know about that. Again, is it that Daniel Jones, is it the coaching he's gotten? Is it, the fact that the offensive line, because it was so, leaky in its pass protection, that it just messed with Daniel's head? I don't know the answer to that. But what I do know is that the Giants are locked in with Daniel Jones next year because of the salary cap situation and the way his contract is set up. So unless they were to trade him, which would be the only way they would get any kind of cap relief, Daniel Jones is going to be here next year. And I do believe once he is healthy, he is going to be the starting quarterback, whether we like it or not, whether the Giants draft a quarterback in the first round or they wait until the second round or whatever. Daniel Jones is projected to be the starter as of now. Right now, things can change. Obviously, if he's not healthy, they go in a different direction. But if he is, that is the plan. I mean, could they have a situation like they did in 2019 when Eli Manning, $19 million was a very expensive backup? Sure, they could. But then you ask yourself, okay, where does DeVito fit in? All right, DeVito right now making a case to compete to be the number 2 quarterback. I don't think he's the number 1, but he is competing to be a number 2 quarterback. So if you draft a quarterback, now what do? You've got Daniel, you've got DeVito, and where do you fit in a rookie? Depending on where you draft him, especially if you take one high. So right now, I don't know that the Giants take one high. I could be wrong. Obviously, it's early. The draft order isn't set. The underclassmen haven't all declared yet. So we'll see. But right now, today, I think if I'm the Giants, I either go receiver or edge rusher, which I think are two of the more pressing needs as of this particular recording. I mentioned edge rusher. I think last year the Giants would have liked to have gotten an edge rusher in the draft, but because they had to trade up to get Jalen Hyatt, I think that kind of thwarted any plans that they had to get an edge rusher. So I do think that that's a priority. I think with cornerback, I think they can afford to maybe look to get some veteran depth there because, they're going to have a bunch of young guys still at that position. So I think a veteran might be the answer there. So that's how I kind of see it playing out right now. Now, obviously, as we get deeper into the off season and we start to get more information and see who's available and where the Giants are drafting and all that stuff and the cap situation, which I'm going to talk about in the next segment, then we can better, fine tune all these things. But this is just my priority list, my preliminary priority list, what I would do and what I would think would play out for this team. Now, coming up, I'm going to talk about the salary cap because look, if they're going to get all this stuff done, it starts with the cap, right? So we'll talk about it. I'll give you an update where they are as of today and where they're headed and what they're looking at. So don't go anywhere. Hey, Giant fans, just because the Giant season is coming to an end soon doesn't mean that the fun of playing daily fantasy sports with Prize Picks has to stop. Because right now, with basketball season underway, Prize Picks gives you the chance to pick combo projections across football and basketball from the Specials League that was created specifically for combo projections featuring 2 or more players from different sports or leagues. And did you also know that you can play along with friends and family by checking out the community tab? Prize Picks is so easy to play. Just pick 2 or more players, predict their stats, and sit back and see how they perform. It takes less than 60 seconds to make an entry. And when you play with Prize Picks, you'll enjoy quick withdrawals, easy gameplay, and a wide selection of players and stat types. So what are you waiting for? Go to prizepicks.com/LockedOnNFL and use the promo code LockedOnNFL for a first deposit match up to $100. That's prizepicks.com/LockedOnNFL. And that promo code is LockedOnNFL for your first deposit match up to $100. Prize Picks, daily fantasy sports made easy. Hey, Giant fans, it's going to be a busy off season for the Giants. And what better way to continue the conversation than as a member of the Locked On Giants Blue Crew community? Get exclusive content and opportunities delivered directly to your phone, such as private Q&A videos, breaking news, and so much more. Plus, members can keep the conversation going with me in one-on-one conversations via text. Join the dozens of Giant fans that have become part of this exclusive community. Try it for free for 14 days, and if you like it, do nothing and continue for just $4.99 a month. If you don't, simply text STOP before your trial period is over and owe nothing. For more information or to register, visit joinsubtext.com/LockedOnNYGiants. All right, everybody, welcome back to the Locked On Giants podcast. You have me, Patricia Traina. And again, no Locked On Giants for Monday, but I will be back with a new episode after the Giants-Eagles game. I'll have my takeaways and all the good stuff that I try and bring you after every game, win or lose. And Won't talk about the game because I think we all know how it's going to go. But anyway, let's talk about the future because that's where I think a lot of us are focused on or starting to focus on. In this segment, I want to talk about the salary cap situation. Where do the Giants stand? How are they looking? What are they going to be able to do? Now, before I do that, just real quick, I know a lot of you are probably saying, hey, Pat, you haven't talked about free agency. You didn't talk about Saquon Barkley. You didn't talk about Xavier McKinney. Where do they fit in the list of priorities? I'm going to talk about that, folks, in another segment or actually another show. But let me give you the numbers here. I'm going to talk about these salary cap numbers and how they stand as of today. Now, again, the salary cap is still fluid because obviously, as the Giants have to sign guys from the practice squad, standard elevations, as they sign guys to replace guys that are injured, like they did on Thursday, they brought up Timmy Horn. Timmy Horn was brought from the Falcons. I had to think about that for a second there. Because the Giants are hurting at defensive tackle. So let's talk about the money. All right. So according to Over the Cap, the Giants in 2024 have $35.853 million total cap space, which presumably includes the $4.373 million that they had as of yesterday for 2023. That money is going to get carried over. But the Giants only have or are projected to have $18.268 million in effective cap space. And the effective cap space is what they need to fit all of the top 51 players under that top 51 rule. So once the new league year starts, the first day of free agency, they've got to, that's why rosters can expand to 90. It's only the top 51 fit. So the Giants only have $18.268 million of effective space to work with. Right now, the Giants are going to need approximately $7.25 million new money, meaning, the difference between swapping a guy out from the top 51 to, the bottom of the roster list, but they're going to need $7.25 million to handle their draft class. That leaves them with $11.017 million in space, which, by the way, is not enough if they want to franchise tag Saquon Barkley, is not enough if they want to re-sign Xavier McKinney. So as was the case last year and the year before, the Giants are going to have to trim some fat off the roster. And in an upcoming show, we'll take a deeper dive into that. I'll have the numbers and all the charts and stuff like that as we get a little bit closer, to the end of the season. But the Giants are going to have to make some moves. So that being said, do they have enough to do everything they want to do? Well, the draft class, they're going to have to put aside the money anyway. So if they get these guys via the draft, yes, they'll be able to, maybe address, offensive line, maybe address a wide receiver, edge rusher, and so forth. If they want a veteran quarterback and a veteran cornerback, they might not have enough. All right. So again, they're going to have to do some cap gymnastics to create some. All right. Now, Joe Shane is going to do it. There are definitely moves that they can make. They can also, if they want to restructure a few contracts, I would imagine maybe Andrew Thomas gets his contract restructured. Maybe they restructured Dexter Lawrence. I don't think they would touch Daniel Jones's contract, especially if they have, plans of adding another quarterback, maybe a younger quarterback. And by the way, what they do with Daniel Jones's contract is going to be very telling, I think, because you would think that would be the first place they would go to get more cap space. So, fortunately for the Giants, I mentioned coaching in the last segment. Fortunately, the salary cap doesn't affect coaching. So I just think, in concluding the list of priorities, it starts with the coaching staff. Dable has got to sit down and ask himself some tough questions. Who does he keep? Who does he move on from? And also, how does he replace those that choose to leave? And then I think moving forward, you want to make sure that these guys, these coaches, get what they need in order to, fit them into the team, that their coaching philosophies are going to fit with what the team is looking to do. because there's nothing worse than having a mismatch in the coaching rank, because that can trickle down and affect the entire, position group that guy or gal is in charge of. So that's got to be done. But as far as the players go, the needs that I gave you, the quarterback, offensive line, receiver, edge rusher, cornerback depth, all very important. Saquon Barkley, I do believe they're going to try and franchise tag him. That could mean that they end up losing Xavier McKinney. But of course, we'll have to see if Joe Shane can clear out some more money. Some decisions are going to have to be made. Obviously, they're not going to be easy. But the Giants, in a nutshell, have a lot of work to do. And it's going to make for a very, very interesting offseason for the New York Giants. All right, Giant fans, that's going to do it for this edition of Locked On Giants. Again, thank you so much for making us your first listener of the day, or watching on YouTube, your first watch of the day. On Monday, Renner's Ranks will be the morning program. And then I, of course, will be back after the Giant Eagle game with the takeaways. So ahead of time, let me just wish you a very Merry Christmas if you celebrate Christmas. To my Blue Crew community members, mailbag will be tomorrow. You'll get the link to the exclusive video. So get your questions into me. And I will see you guys on Monday after the Eagle game. Take care, everybody. Have a great weekend.